Well, when Joel was little, not too little, we got an 8mm camera. Joel was always fascinated with that thing. And then we got an 8mm projector. And then he took off like a steam engine.
I started showing films in my garage when I was a kid. I turned my parents' basement into a movie theater.
And I made popcorn, and Joel went to the library and rented these films and set it all up in the garage, and we put sheets over the junk, fixed it all up like a movie theater.
I would hand draw flyers. There was no way to print them, so I would redraw them over and over again and hand those out to everyone in the neighborhood.
And I think it was quite a lot of fun. Kids sat there spellbound because this was before everybody had a television. So it was kind of fun to go over to the neighbors and watch movies.
Then when I moved to Lawrence, I had already collected a lot of films in Wichita when I came up here because that was actually the tail end of when everybody was throwing them away. So I wanted to do a drive-in theme party because I'd worked at a lot of drive-ins. I managed a drive-in in Emporia, and I kind of wanted to bring back a drive-in. A friend of ours had a huge backyard in Vinland, so he said, come on out here and we'll do it out here. So we did a whole series of the Escape drive-ins.
I'd heard about them. They were legendary, where out in the country, Joel would set up a big screen and do pretty much what you're doing with Basement Sublet of Horror, I think, with intersplicing of old archived footage in a comic way. And I'd never seen that. I'd known people who had gone to your shows or had seen your shows in Wichita, heard over and over how good you were at it and how entertaining they were. So I was pleased that was part of the Basement Sublet of Horror as well, as opposed to just the typical horror host.
Shows got out of hand. I mean, we'd have 200 to 300 people showing up, and it was really just myself and my wife and a couple other people doing all the work, and it just was too much for everybody to deal with. So I looked for another way to show films, and the Free State Brewery had just opened their beer garden, which was supposed to be a third movie theater for Liberty Hall. So it had the projection booth and everything, but it was just an empty shell. So I changed the name to the Empty Pockets Budget Film Fest as the indoor version of the movie show, and Empty Pockets ran at the Free State Brewery for 3 years. The Wichita Center for the Arts picked it up and as a summer replacement show, and it just wound up staying on and playing for 6 years down there. And the indoor version adopted a lot of the Escape drive-in elements, live music, prize drawing, along with a few new ones of interactive games. The trouble with that show was I did it too long, too many shows, and really just got burned out on it. I'd have to drive down to Wichita and load in the gear, and essentially I had some help, but it was essentially just me doing this whole thing again.
Our grand prize, the big can of pork and beans.
The next logical step was a TV show. In the genre of horror hosts, there are just a few characters that are worked with. So I just kind of see it as a form of theater in a way that has the archetype character that you play. There's the ghoul, there's the mad scientist, and I don't know, is there a third one? Usually they're ghouls and mad scientists. I went with the ghoul because that was what the host was. The host in Rodney, the host was actually Tom Leahy. He played the host and also played a science fiction host, a cartoon host in the afternoons called Major Astro. And Major Astro was on forever, and I would watch Major Astro, but I'd also watch the host and Rodney. So in the afternoons I had Major Astro, and late at night we had the host and Rodney. And it just was a really great thing because Tom is really energetic and flamboyant and really goes over the top with the whole deal, and so he was always entertaining as the host. Kind of playing homage to the host and Rodney, but I'm also kind of doing a parody of the host and Rodney. I love the show. I've always loved the show, but just like I mess with the films, I have to mess with the format. The name Gunther Deadman came from a dream I had probably, I think, about 1983. The first appearance of Gunther Deadman is in a book of short stories that I wrote. But in the dream, I was watching a TV show, and it was called Gunther Deadman's Floating Spaceship. And from that point on, I just stuck in the back of my mind that I wanted to do a TV show with at least one of the characters being Gunther Deadman. In the 60s, Dick Smith, the famous makeup artist, put a magazine together for kids, the Famous Monsters of Filmland Makeup Handbook. And it showed you how to do a whole range of makeups from just ordinary household stuff. So Gunther Deadman is a takeoff on the ghoul. So the makeup is pretty much traditional ghoul makeup. I just sat down, made it up on the first show, and I put on heavier eyebrows. That just comes from Groucho Marx, because that's one of the things I read about him, is why he had those big eyebrows. It's just, it made his face more expressive. You know, big eyebrows, you can raise and lower them. And I'm also trying with the makeup, I didn't want to really be a celebrity, so what I'm doing is I tried to create a character that doesn't look like me, so that when I go out, I don't really want to be stopped as Gunther Deadman. I don't want people coming up to me.
Hello, my friends.
The worse my hair was in real life, the better it looked on the show, you know, so the more straggly it was, the better. So the very first show, I watched that again, and it's awfully short. I mean, I thought it was long at the time, but it looked much better towards the end of the season when it's really straggly. And Gunther Deadman's voice was, you know, just supposed to be this old man voice. And I tried it on camera, and it just didn't work. And I know Gunther's a German name, so several people have said, why doesn't he have a German accent? Well, it just didn't make sense, and I felt silly doing a German accent. So I wasn't really trying to do an English accent. That's just what came out. That's the voice that I tried several voices on camera, and that's the first one that I felt comfortable using.
Action. Yeah.
Action. Hello, my friends, and tonight... I wanted to have an elaborate opening title sequence, but once you get into digital compositing and putting things together, it really just takes a huge amount of time to process that video. So the opening of the show is actually a parody of the horror host show from Wichita, the host and Rodney. One of the later versions of the show, there was this old haunted house on the hilltop, and the camera would pull in slowly, and there'd be a light on in the window, like a dungeon window, and the camera would go to that window, and then it would crossfade to the set, which is the set of a dungeon. So since I grew up in ranch-style homes, and I now live in a ranch-style home, it struck me as funny to have the whole show take place in a ranch home. You know, I like the humor of that. And it's the same thing where the camera zooms into a basement window, and it's the same idea. The opening title music is nothing high-tech. You know, just a collected feel from a lot of different films. So the Don Knotts films and the Addams Family, all of that's all kind of mixed together, not really consciously. I just took it all in and made my own version of that, because I wanted to have the same feel as a 60s or 70s horror TV show.